All right, so we're going to talk about how to make the perfect podcast episode. If you are creating a podcast and you want to know, how to structure it so people listen all the way through, and if you have any advertisements or any breaks, any promotions, anything like that, they don't leave the podcast when it happens. So I actually have some breathing exercises that I do in my podcast. My podcast is the Positive Mindset Podcast. So that kind of relates to what we're trying to do, get our mind right. But someone asked this question on a previous video. They said, what made you decide to do the breathing exercises in the beginning? And it's kind of a interesting idea or concept of how I got there. So when I originally started doing my podcast, I got started on Anchor, which is the hosting site that I used. And they had a promotion, or like an ambassador ad, you would call it, where you basically shout out Anchor to use it. And I still actually have this ambassador ad now, but they shout that, or you would shout that out, and after a certain amount of listens, you'd make some money. And so when I first started making the podcast, you had to put the ad, or at least I only knew how to do it this way, but you had to put that promotion in the podcast. So you couldn't, play it at the beginning, which is what I do now, but I couldn't play it at the beginning. So I had to figure out, with my podcast being kind of short, it's only, 10 to 12 minutes or so, how I can put that in where it makes sense. Because when I start going over the subject matter, I didn't want it to just stop and then this random ad play, because I didn't want people to tune out. And so I decided to make two segments. I would make a segment kind of introducing myself, hey, welcome to the podcast. I would mention what the podcast was going to be about. So I would talk about, how this podcast was going to be about whatever subject matter. And then I came up with the idea of doing some breathing exercises, because I thought that would be good with what I'm doing. It'd be nice to take a breath. Many people don't breathe. My background is working in fitness, and that was something I always knew, is that people just don't ever take a second to breathe. And so I was like, well, I'll just add this breathing in. It'll extend the time, so it's like a 2-minute intro, and then that ad could play. And that's how it started. Now, eventually Anchor did change it to where you can put the ad at the front, and so that's what I do now. So when someone first tunes into the podcast, the ad plays in the beginning, then the podcast plays. That will hurt your growth. So if you were someone that's just starting out, I probably wouldn't recommend putting an ad or sponsorship and stuff right at the beginning. I know it's tempting because you want to make some money, and if you want to go that route, go that route. But I think if people don't know your content, they don't know, the quality or what you're delivering, the odds of them listening to a 60-second ad or 30-second ad before getting to hear your podcast are probably pretty low. It still even hurts mine, I think, as it grows, even though it's growing well. I do think that some people might click on it, hear the ad, and click out. So, that is a downside to it. But if you're wanting to do it professionally, if you want to be able to make money to reinvest in your podcast, or, even if it's just side income, you're going to have to run ads. So I moved it to the front. I still have that 2.5 minute little intro. Sometimes I do a promotion right there. It's very rare. It's about once every 2 weeks at this point, because I think, people want the message, and I could probably do a lot more promotions and make more money. But every decision can't just be about how you can maximize money, because if you, at least in my opinion, if you try to maximize money, then you're not maximizing the quality and the experience of your show.
Which has to be the most important part, is the quality of the show, because sometimes it's so easy to get focused on the revenue and trying to make money and build a business with your podcast, and I think that's what encourages a lot of people to make them. But the quality of your show is what's going to take you the long route. So again, it's okay to build it around making ad spots. I absolutely did it, but formulate it thinking about the listener's experience. When you listen from their point of view, like how they would enjoy it, what they would like to hear, and what would keep them interested, that'll help you program it in a way for long-term success. And long-term success is the key. Shortcuts just aren't going to work with this. It may help initially, but build something of quality, analyze it, look at but if you look at like the listenership and when people turn off the podcast or turn out, that's a good indicator of maybe you need to adjust something. Now, it's never going to be 100% people listen all the way through. So, there's always going to be drop-off points, but pay attention to what you're doing, pay attention to what you're building, and just over time, you'll create something great. Listen, ask for feedback. That'll help you build it. But to summarize, start with a really good intro, something that connects with people, that gives people like the vibration of you, like what you are, how you do things, and the experience they're going to achieve, and then dive into the message. So you could do a teaser, you could take an excerpt from the show that's like really popular or something that's going to get people's attention. You could do that, or you could just tease it yourself, like talking about what's going to come, and do something that's relevant to your audience or relevant to you or your subject matter, and then dive into it. And then be consistent. Give it time. Don't change it every single week or whatever your cadence of episodes are. Be consistent. This is something I've done for a few years now, and what I'll be doing 2 years from now will be way different than what I'm doing now. So I hope that helps. If you like this video or have more questions on how to build a great podcast that people love, subscribe, like it, like this video so other people can find it. And I appreciate it, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.